Well, I'm the Joker, baby!
It's no secret that the Joker is one of the most popular villains not only in comics, but pop culture in general. There's probably not a single person out there who doesn't know who everyone's favorite Jonkler is. Whether it's Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, before the sequel at least, or if you're some loser like me and read the comic books he came from that nobody cares about. Joker is everywhere. It's hard to find really any Batman media that doesn't include him, or at the very least mentions him. Even mostly Jokerless Batman stuff like Beware the Batman or Matt Reeves' The Batman has him in either concept art or obscured appearances. Joker is so popular and iconic to the point that he'll even get his own spin-offs every now and then, sometimes completely independent from Batman himself, for better or for worse. The Joker is one of DC's biggest cash cows, but usually, in the realm that is big to comic book superheroes, that's both a blessing and a curse. Outside of the occasionally pretty good adaptation, it's felt like ever since around the beginning of the New 52, Joker's character is stagnated. Over time, he's felt less like a clown prince of crime and more like Jeff the Killer if he was a pretentious philosophy major. Joker stories of today tend to sort of blend together in a hodgepodge of shock value. And not only that, but Joker's been milked to death, and you can't go long without a Batman title throwing in a really big Joker arc of some kind. This has left many fans absolutely sick of him, even to the point of genuinely not liking him. Because of all this, I really wanted to take a look at how Joker got to such a point, and what I'd personally do to change it. Let's see why modern Joker sucks.
He said it! He said it!
So we can't talk about modern Joker without talking about what makes him, or at least made him, Batman's perfect foil. Joker first appeared in the very first issue of Batman's solo series in the spring of 1940, in which he was originally supposed to be killed. But that's when editor Whitney Ellsworth stepped in and said, "Hold up, let him cook." So they threw together an improvised panel, and the Jonkler lived to jonk another day. The rest, as you know, is history. As time went on, Joker became established as Batman's #1 arch nemesis. And if you ask me, I still think that the Joker is the absolute perfect foil to Batman. You look at Batman, this dark creature of the night who uses theatrics, gadgets, and his own cunning to strike fear into the hearts of criminals. He's tall, dark, imposing, and is a pretty scary guy on the outside. But under all of that, Batman is a deeply compassionate man who finds death deeply upsetting and just wants to help his fellow man to make sure nobody has to suffer the same trauma that he went through. Now, if you were to take all of those traits and completely flip it upside down, then you get the Joker.
I'm the Joker, baby!
The Joker is the clown prince of crime. He goes around with a smile on his face, and at a first glance, you can mistake him as a friendly-looking clown. He's got a twisted sense of humor, and always is looking for a good laugh. Like Batman, he uses theatrics of his own variety and all sorts of trickery to get what he wants. He's a pretty funny guy. But under all of that, the Joker is an evil, monstrous human being who finds death absolutely hilarious and is always looking for the most killer punchlines. Whatever hardships he's endured, he'll make sure that everyone's just as miserable as he is, especially if he finds it funny. The Joker is the yin to Batman's yang, the chaos to his order. Everything I just mentioned is what made the Joker an absolutely perfect narrative foil to Batman's character and everything he stands for. And he never needed to prove it. Joker's story always spoke for itself. Of course, the whole thing completely changed when The Killing Joke came around. The Killing Joke by Alan Moore is a story that I'm sure requires little introduction. In it, the Joker is out to prove a point. And I think that this is one of the first stories that really dive deep into what makes the Joker tick. It's highly revered as one of the most iconic must-read Batman stories and one of the best, depending on who you ask. If you were to ask me, I think it definitely still holds a lot of merit. Somewhat. In The Killing Joke, Joker's dead set on proving that all it takes is one bad day to drive the sanest man to lunacy. A bit of a social experiment, if you will, with Commissioner Gordon as his test subject. Joker wants to drive this man absolutely jonkers, and obviously Batman has to stop him. Throughout the story, we get a lot of flashbacks to what could have potentially made the Joker the way he is today. Obviously, it's not confirmed to be the one, but it definitely gives us an idea on what tragic event could have led up to the Joker becoming what he is, other than the obvious fact of him being the Red Hood. Although one could probably argue that even despite the tragic story he could have had, Joker was probably already a monster just waiting to be let out of his cage. Sort of like a Walter White situation, I guess. To try and get his point across, Joker tries everything. He tortures Gordon both physically and mentally, but even at the end when Batman saves him, Gordon doesn't crack. This story was one of the first times where Joker did some things that were truly too far. And for someone like him, that's saying something. Killing Joke even predates Death in the Family, where he kills Jason Todd, albeit only by a few months. So, Joker's plan fails, but the Batman doesn't just beat him up and throw him in Arkham like he usually does. He talks to him.
God damn it. It's empty. Well, what are you waiting for? I shot a defenseless girl. I terrorized an old man. Why don't you kick the hell out of me and get a standing ovation from the public gallery?
Because I'm doing this one by the book. And because I don't want to. Do you understand? I don't want to hurt you. I don't want either of us to end up killing the other. But we're running out of alternatives. And we both know it. Maybe it all hinges on tonight. Maybe this is our last chance to sort this bloody mess out. If you don't take it, then we're locked onto a suicide course. Both of us. To the death. It doesn't have to end like that. I don't know what it was that bent your life out of shape, but who knows? Maybe I've been there too. Maybe I can help. We could work together. I could rehabilitate you. You needn't be out there on the edge anymore. You need be alone. We don't have to kill each other. What do you say?
Batman wants to help the Joker, wants to help him rehabilitate. Maybe they're not so different, and maybe Batman can show him the way out of trauma and pain just like he found the way out. But Joker refuses. Even for a mind as deluded and psychotic as his, he knows that there's absolutely no chance of going back for him. He tells a joke, they both laugh, and it's left up to reader interpretation if they just share a laugh together, or if Batman finally puts an end to the Joker's life. Obviously, the latter never happened because this comic became canon. Now, I'm mentioning the Killing Joke because to many people, this is what basically planted the seeds for modern Joker stories. As time went on, even though Joker was still mostly Joker, there became a point where he was starting to get progressively darker. Then the final nail of the coffin came all the way in 2008 with The Dark Knight, arguably one of the most influential comic book movies of all time, partly due to Heath Ledger's iconic performance as the Joker. And don't get me wrong, I still think Heath's Joker is nothing short of fantastic, but I think it's here where writers started to get the wrong takeaways from how successful his performance was. A lot of what made up the Joker in The Dark Knight was that he had a lot to say about... Much like in The Killing Joke, Joker here was trying to prove a point about the fallacies of morality and people's instincts. He was essentially trying to prove that the entire world was just like him. But that wasn't all that he was about. Even when he was on his whole thing about... the Joker was still funny. Very funny, actually.
You think you could steal from us and just walk away?
Yeah. You killed 6 of my friends. Let her go.
Very poor choice of words.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy. He can't feel the neck. See?
A few years after, one of the most ultimately pointless and unpopular reboots ever happened. New 52. Oh, New 52. What to say about you? This was basically the era where DC decided, hey, let's do Crisis on Infinite Earths, but really bad and make all of our characters worse. Nobody, and I mean nobody, likes the New 52. Many of the characters turned into loose husks of their former selves, and any sauce that they might have had pre-Flashpoint was out the window. Decades of history just gone. Also, the designs were really, really, really bad.
There are 387 million miles of printed circuits that fill my comics. If the word hate were engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate.
Now, why do I bring this up? Well, the reason is that, in my opinion, this also affected Joker as well. At least somewhat. While many New 52 comics varied from okay to downright atrocious to a lot of fans, Scott Snyder's Batman run at the time is still pretty highly revered, and from what I read, it actually was pretty good. But what about Joker? Oh, nothing really, he just cut his face off.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Death of the Family, not to be confused with Death in the Family, is a story where I feel like the problems with Joker stories of today really started to manifest. Not to say that this story is exactly what started it, but probably the greatest example I could think of. Death of the Family is whatever. The reason that the Joker cut off his face, from what I can recall, is that even under his mask, being his face, he was still the Joker. That was all a part of his plan to destroy the Bat family, who Joker also used to psychologically torture Batman and trick him into believing that he went all 2006 Moon Knight on them and took their faces off as well. Wow, guys, isn't the Joker so awesome and scary? He took his face off for superficial reason and is doing essentially the Killing Joke, but way edgier. Again, I feel like this story was the start of Joker turning into this weird serial killer mastermind. It feels like he took a steep heel turn from squirting flowers and bang guns to...
Mr. Police, you could have saved her. I gave you all the clues.
This is just my personal opinion, but was there any true reason to have the Joker cut his face off? The story is weird to me because it reads like it wants to be one of those must-read Joker stories, but I think that it's trying to have substance and something that is essentially shock value. I know it's such a small, minor thing, but do you get what I mean? And the fact that later on Joker would just get his face back fully healed anyway just makes you wonder, what was the point of this? Joker's portrayal in this actually feels like a representation of a little something I like to call 90s comic villain syndrome. 90s comic villain syndrome, 9CVS for short, is something that's always plagued comics ever since, well, around the 90s. 9CVS occurs when a writer on a certain comic run deems that one of the villains for their flagship hero is too goofy or too weak. So, instead of trying to find a creative and inventive way to modernize them and bring them up to the quality standard of other iconic villains, they instead default on stripping any of said villain's color, transforming them into what is essentially a try-hard horror movie villain. 9CVS is obviously not entirely exclusive to the 90s, and is a practice that even continues to this day. Whether or not 9CVS is something that is undone or ends up sticking varies from character to character. Examples of 9CVS include, but are not limited to, Catman, Calendar Man, Toyman, and Killer Moth. I guess Firefly could also be put into this, but the difference is that I feel like Firefly is an example of a gritty modern reimagining done right. Love that guy. But if you or a loved one know of a character that has been a victim of 9CVS, call the number on screen now and get entitled to financial compensation. By that I mean just comment some character down below. There's no money, but do it anyways if you want. Okay, back to Joker. Later on, Joker would reappear in the storyline Batman Endgame, where he somehow hypnotized the Justice League with his iconic Joker Hey, wait a minute! We're moving on, I'm not talking about this again. So, Joker's Joker juices are now spreading around the city, and Batman has to put a stop to him, as Joker's goal for this particular plan is that he plans for it to be the final battle between him and Batman. It also implies that the Joker is some immortal entity similar to the likes of Vandal Savage or Ra's al Ghul, called the Pale Man. Are you taking mental note of that? Well, don't bother, because this story is literally the only time it's ever relevant. The comic seemingly ends with Batman and Joker dying in a crumbling cavern, and so the final battle between Batman and the Joker comes to an end, and their story finally comes to a close. Nah, I'm just kidding, they both come back later on in the same run, so it doesn't even matter. Endgame is nowhere near as egregious of Death of the Family when it comes to how it uses Joker, but instead of being edgy and pointless, it's just pointless. And now I bet you're wondering, wow, that's a real shame. I hope DC doesn't try to hype something up as Batman and Joker's final battle, only for it to be not that at all. Well, guess what? They did exactly that. Joker War. Ooh, Joker War. If you thought that the last stories were rough, this one's rough. At the start of James Tynions' Batman run, they were setting up a new arc based around a villain called the Designer. The Designer was essentially a criminal mastermind who had meticulously designed perfect crimes. He'd made a deal with a handful of Batman's rogues at the time, before said deal went south and he was seemingly killed by the Joker. But the Designer would reappear years later, and begins to set in motion a plan that would end with Batman's undoing. Sounds pretty neat, right? Here's the problem. The Designer never really came back to life, because it was revealed that the Joker was using chemicals of the Designer's own creation in order to puppeteer his corpse and carry out his plans. So yeah, whatever arc the Designer was going to have is immediately hijacked by the Joker, who ends up taking over the whole thing by the end, like it was the book of Designer Fett and he was the Jokalorian. This kicks off the storyline known as Joker War. Another story where Joker's goal is to have one final battle with Batman. Accompanied by his new girlfriend Punchline, Joker seizes all of Bruce Wayne's fortune as well as his company. Throughout the story, things get pretty rough until the end where Harley forces Batman into a situation where he has to make a choice between saving her or saving Joker. Batman finally chooses to leave Joker to die in order to save Harley's life in a scene that I actually kinda like.
I do love a wild card. She's still got that old spunk, doesn't she?
Listen close. If you were smart enough to pick the pockets from the next-gen Batsuit, the bomb can be disarmed.
No! That's not how it works. You're going to have to save me yourself. You're not going to risk my dying and leave your butler's body to roast with me. Wait, where are you going? Don't just walk away from me! Don't you dare just walk away! Shut up! Shut up!
But they immediately, and I do mean immediately, reveal that the Joker's still alive right after. They even gave him a whole solo series right after this. Are you starting to notice a pattern? It feels like all DC sees with the Joker nowadays is just this big cash cow that they need to keep milking until he's completely run dry, if he hasn't been already. They'll keep putting out all these big events with the Joker and they'll hype it up as Joker's playing for keeps, or this is Batman and Joker's final battle, when it's really none of those things. All we're gonna get from Joker now is these massive spectacles of torture porn and shock value in order for Joker to make a statement about and how our lives are meaningless. Laughing Fish wouldn't be made today. Joker's 5-Ray Revenge wouldn't be made today. Going Sane? I mean, it could be made today, but who knows. A lot of the stories that made the Joker resonate with people just wouldn't fly today in terms of how DC would want to use him. The last interesting story of Joker I remember was in Detective Comics issue 1008. And it's good. It's actually really, really good. Right before the whole Year of the Villain event, Joker takes an entire carnival hostage and forces Batman to participate in carnival festivities before the next crisis of cosmic proportions spoils all the fun. And if he doesn't, Joker will activate deadly necklaces around each carnival attendee, which will kill them. So throughout this story, Batman's just playing along and doing recon until eventually getting the upper hand. This is one of the only stories that I can remember in recent times that feels like a Joker story, if that makes any sense. In this comic, Joker's not only a definite threat and pretty intimidating, but he's a wisecracking clown with a sick sense of humor. It's a hell of a lot better than everything else we've been getting for the past almost decade and a half. But unfortunately, this is the one rare exception in a sea of monotony, and I doubt we'll be getting anything like it anytime soon. So now that we've closely looked at the problem that modern Joker stories consistently have never been able to overcome, how would I personally change the way the Joker's going and set his character on a better path? I kill him. Okay, but seriously, aside from the story that I just now mentioned in Detective Comics, I honestly don't really think that there's a whole lot you can do with the Joker's character anymore. I feel like he's lived up to all of his potential, and he doesn't really have any more to prove. It kinda seems like modern DC just keeps trying to justify his existence in his spot as Batman's most iconic villain. But the Joker is like any other joke. When you tell it too many times, it's not really that funny anymore. Even some of the most iconic villains in all of pop culture have their endings. Star Wars might be milking Darth Vader from time to time, but even then, that guy's still dead as a doornail now. And think about it this way. What are two of the most iconic and respected adaptations of the Joker? The one's voiced by Mark Hamill, who basically just is the Joker to almost everyone and their mother, just like Kevin Conroy's Batman. And do you know what Mark's versions of the Joker both have in common, from both the DCAU to the Arkham games? They die. Their story ends. And they have pretty amazing send-offs too. They don't die by Batman breaking his code. They die of their own hubris. In their final punchline, the Joker's ultimately on them.
That's not funny. That's not...
And that is always the most poetic way of ending the Joker's story. I think that both Endgame and Joker War have a lot of elements that could make for a great final send-off to the Joker and his rivalry with Batman. But unfortunately, I doubt DC will ever commit to it. Because as we all know, comics are like The Simpsons. They'll keep going on and on so that all of their flagship characters can keep making them big cash money, and then we die.
I'm Pickle Rick!
So, with that in mind, how would I handle the way the Joker's going without killing him? Well, if it were up to me, the bottom line is this. Make Joker fun again. If you'll allow me to go back to Mark Hamill's Joker again, the thing that version of the character did best is that him being both scary and funny wasn't handled like some weird dual split identity thing like recent comics have tried to establish. Joker just was. He pulled off both simultaneously at the same time and it felt organic. If you have too much of funny Joker, he just comes off as really hard to take seriously as a threat like in his more campier appearances. If you have too much of scary Joker, his stories are just kind of pretentious and you get bored of them really quickly like in his modern appearances. A good Joker needs a healthy balance of being both. Not one or the other at any given time, but both. But people have forgotten that. And because people forget that, we'll keep getting more endgames and Joker Wars until we keel over and die from the pure monotony of it all. But despite the gloom and doom of these statements, I can only hope that one day maybe DC will get the memo and remember what made Joker such a great character in the first place. But until then, what can you do? In any case, I'm Bat Spectre, and if you like me talking about Batman and all sorts of niche Bat topics, stay tuned. Same Spectre time, same Spectre channel.